Chapter 12. The man does not wake for 2 days. For 2 days she prowls her valley, and her lake, and his equipment, and makes all of it hers. On her creaking legs she moves through his place. The piles and drifts of it shift to orderly lines, and every item is blessed with her gaze. Soon she knows every piece that is here, and every creature that inhabits the lake, and every rabbit that scampers now unafraid before her. As she explores this rocky bowl held high in the mountains, she is drawn again and again to the mountain of him lying on the edge of the water, his feet sodden. She watches the wound as first it dries in the noon sun and then scabs over, but still, she knows it is not healed. There are times when she places her nose near to it and inhales, and the scent of infection is there. At night she returns to her clams, slumbering with them beneath the waning moon. When he finally wakes, he stumbles to the tank, thinking only, do they live? The pump is intact and whirring. The solar panels are still powering it night and day. He reaches the lip of his box and peers over the edge. The water is circulating, pristine, and the clams crouch in ordered rows. He stares. He did not lay them like this. Each of their lips are parted and their mantles flash blue and orange fluorescence. Each of them is thriving, beaming and open to the sun. He turns to look over his shoulder to the burning sphere above. Too much, he mutters as he lurches to his equipment, hobbling against the life flowing back into his waterlogged feet. Need shade. Nothing is as he remembered it. Quickly he sifts through the piles of his equipment, finding his big fold of green netting. He throws it out, grunting at the pain in his back and legs, the old weather-stiffened net raining muck. He drags it across rock and sand and heaves it over the lip, sand falling into the clear water as the burn of the high sun recedes. Again he looks over his shoulder to the fiery orb, lips parched. He scowls. He tramps to the edge of the trees where he finds 4 stout branches. He hacks them from the undergrowth and drags them back to his prize. With long spikes he hammers them into the edge of the tank, and then one by one he raises the net to make an awning. Finally, it is done. His thirst awakens. Without a thought, he stumbles forward into the water, and as he takes off from the shelf and falls in a churn of bubbles, he opens his mouth and drinks. He opens his eyes and washes them, and he opens his arms and lets the water soothe his burning back. Minutes later, he returns to the shelf, blowing, and heaves himself onto it. He thinks of hunger and feels it, such appetite. He notes the rifle and bullets in his pack and imagines a rabbit turning over a fire. Juice floods his mouth. He grins through the water beaded in his beard. It is good to be hungry, good to have appetite. Absently, the fingers of his right hand wander to the crook of his left, looking for the slice and the steel spikes of gut that he has come to know. But the gut is gone. He prods it carefully. It has split open and has scabbed over but for a hole at the center. It is cool to the touch. He smiles. The gut must have split, and he has been given this gift. He clamps the nails of his forefinger and thumb onto the knot of the gut still spiking out of his flesh. He pulls and the black thread slides out easy and clean. He takes the gut at the other end of the wound where it is still caught. That too slides out easy and clean. He sniffs the gut. He scowls. No, not clean. Something lingers. He peers at the wound. He wipes it open, splitting part of the scab. The flesh within is pink, but tender. And right in the center is a dark spot. He sniffs at it. There is something in there. He turns to his campsite, the boy's knife. Where is it? A pail of water bubbles over his fire with his hunting blade within it. He sits easy. He knows what he must do. I should have antibiotics, he mutters as he removes the steaming blade, his calloused fingers only dimly feeling the heat. He does, however, have ethanol, and the wound shines with the liquid sting. He angles his arm to the sun, maximizing the light, and peers again at the dark spot in there, just beneath the flesh. He brings his blade nearer and carefully lets the bright edge pierce the surface. He pushes it in, his scowl the only sign of discomfort, looking for the hard edge of the black. But the blade does not find it. He grunts. He pushes the blade deeper, slicing left and right and angling down, sure that the object must be just there. At any moment his blade will hook its edge. Blood starts to well from the open cut. Already he has sunk his blade 2 centimeters into his arm. He shakes his head and pulls the blade out. He reaches for his bottle of ethanol and allows some of it to fall into the wound. The sting sets his scowl. Whatever is within will not come out. So be it, he murmurs, and sits back from the fire. He looks around to his lake and the cliff and finally to the trees. This bowl of water high in the mountain regards him in return, impassive. He rises, a gesture of defiance against even these cliffs that he would call home. He knows that there is no sympathy here, that man and beast receive only what they are allocated, and when their account is due, there is no reprieve. He stalks down to his equipment and tools, ready to continue his work. That night, a fire crackles on the edge of the lake. He sits beside it, 2 rock rabbits blackening on sticks above. The birds of the trees are silent. Only the waterfall speaks. He looks out over the dark water. Where is she? He searches the shallows, carefully drawing his eyes around all of the edge. There are innumerable crevices for her to hide in, innumerable shadows in which to crouch. By now he has examined the clams. They are in better health than he could have hoped for. With his hydrometer he has tested the salinity of the water and found it at a level of perfection that he could not have achieved. He has returned the tarp, placing the clams in their new tank that is now sealed with epoxy. He has begun to lay out the foundation of his new seedbed in the shallows. It is risky, but he will have to use the second tank to drain the water into, so that he might move his main tank down to the shallows. He rests in the knowledge of his work completed, and in the knowledge of her. He knows that she has saved them, and that she ministered to his wound. And he knows this place is different. In the time that he slept, something has changed. The song of the birds is different. The lapping of the water is different. The roar of the waterfall, a sound he has known for many days and nights, has changed. He shifts his eyes to the dark smear of the trees, and he knows. She is the difference. This valley has taken on new life. It is the same as hunting sailfish and feeling that snap on the line, where before there was open and empty ocean, now there is certainty, a relationship, for the creature is here. Soon his rabbits are cooked and he eats them, the first food for many days, and soon his fire has burned low, and still he sits watching the dark water. He knows she has saved them. He knows she is out there. And so he waits, and finally, she comes. A shiver heralds her arrival, the softest breeze upon his cheek. In the dark water he sees a white smudge blooming. Ripples extend from it, circling outward, the center traveling towards him until she rises. He watches her eyes appear, fixed on him. Carefully, she stands. Her form assaults him. She has grown. In the half-light he cannot be certain, but it seems that she is a foot taller, and her legs are finely muscled. He remembers the feel of her shins beneath his fingers, the fine fractures running through the bone. She pauses at the edge of the water. Why is she waiting? Is she looking at him? He cannot see the direction of her gaze or the blaze of her eyes, but the embers of the fire are bright, his position clear. She pauses a moment more at the edge, steadying herself it seems, and then she glides over the rocky ground to the tank. Her long silhouette flickers in the gloom. A moment more he watches her, a regal shadow within shadow, and then she slips into the tank. He stares at the box in the moonlight, imagining the creature within. What are you doing with my clams? The words are shocking. He has heard them as he hears his own mind. It is the sound of his own voice, but its origin is not the same. The words come from outside him, he is certain. They come from her. His throat is dry. He swallows, and then he speaks to the dark. I'm growing pearls with them. I will use them to save the buy. The silence echoes back at him. The waterfall clatters to the lake. The moon beams, and the warm night is a whisper. He doubts himself. He prepares to put this voice he has heard aside, and then it speaks again with a clarity that burns. You may. The words are as clear as if she was sitting beside him. He does not reply. Instead, he sits beside his faintly glowing coals, drinking the night. In the morning, he takes time to ensure that she is not there. He is noisy at making his fire and brewing his coffee. He is loud at going a little way into the trees to relieve himself. He is sure she has gone when he finally approaches the tank. But still he approaches cautiously, his heart hammering as he peers in under the awning and sees that she is not there. The clams are there, 2 perfect rows of them, with shells open and mantles greedily awaiting the sun. He passes his hand across the top of them and they close one by one at his shadow. He dips a cleaned paint tin into the tank and raises it up. Softly, he places his spectacles on his nose and carefully inserts his thermometer into the sample, taking a reading. And then he places his hydrometer inside. He waits as the gauge rises. Soon he has a number. He checks it against his plastic-wrapped table and scratches at his temple as he calculates. 1.022. Once again, perfect. He is about to leave the tank, his day's work beckoning him, when something catches his eye. The shell of the clam just beneath him. Clustered along the sweep of it is a rash so fine he almost missed it, a moss mottled to the same black as the shell. Alarmed, Uncle Mike thrusts his nose closer. An infection is the last thing he needs, and then his breathing pauses in his throat. The mottled growth is not some alien. They are in fact tiny clams, little veliger, each with its own gossamer shell and the beginnings of a foot. They have bred. He turns his eyes to the others and carefully examines their shells. Everywhere, on every sweep of every surface is the same dark rash. On every shell are clusters of veliger, hundreds of baby clams. He rears up, searching the lake, the riven cliffs and the jumbled tree line. She is nowhere. Hope rises in him. Certainty steals into his heart. Although impossible, he feels his enterprise will succeed. And why not? Why would this blessed bowl high in the mountain not once again provide a miracle? He purses his lips and begins to whistle while he sets to work making the second of his tanks. Every man gets his chance, he mutters. Yes, every man. But his optimism is tempered by the throbbing of his arm. The black seed pulses within. He works feverishly. Having already completed 1 tank, he begins to cut from memory, trusting instinct to mark and saw so that he may keep his momentum. He plows through the remaining wood, calculating what is left of the materials he has. He wants a bigger tank than the first. He believes he has the sealant, piping, awning, and tubing necessary. While he works, he allows thoughts of returning to the buyer for resupply to rise in his mind, as well as the option of taking the trail further east and journeying to a neighboring settlement to find his wares. But his labors are procrastinations, his circling dreams attempts at keeping reality at bay. What was at first a sense has become a sensation. Fever is rising in his cells. His movements are becoming heavier. He is beginning to swim through mud. The dark seed in his wound is now also in his brain. It grows there. It is doubt. He soldiers on until it is time to assemble his first 2 panels into base and wall. Immediately he sees that his workmanship is incorrect. He has not cut cleanly. His first edge is not flush. I'll file it down, he tuts and mutters, and then chuckles at that idea. His tank requires precision. He does not have silicone to hide imperfections. I'll use the top, he murmurs, putting his hand out to wood to steady himself, and again laughter is his answer. He knows this is not a good path. To rely on the top as a tank in case he makes a mistake is to accept imperfections. He cannot waste anything out here. He can't afford mistakes. A sudden spike of fever runs through him, and he knows he must quit. "We have 12, he mutters as he seats himself on the rock. "She will care for them." He looks at his arm. The cut is inflamed, swollen against his skin. He shakes his head. He knows he cannot dig there again. It is the digging that has aggravated the wound. Heat rises. He looks to the lake and the cool water. He is afraid to go in there. He might lose consciousness and drown. He sits a moment, feeling the pull of the forest to his right, but not wanting to look. But he must. He knows he has to take shelter inside. This is not what he had wanted. He meant to have finished his work before entering that place, but fate has played his hand. Perhaps it is time, he muses as he groans to his feet. Fever is bending time. Every movement is an effort. He begins to shuffle. He goes with his hands held out to preserve his balance, inching his way forward while the infection rises. It is cool in the forest. Against his building fever, the dappled shade brings relief. Sound is muted here. He stands for a moment, listening, looking. The fever is giving him a heightened clarity. He sees the trees in hyper detail. They are the same, he mutters, reaching out to place his hand against the long neck of one. They twist ahead to form a path, the same path he has known before. He shuffles forward, pulling himself with sloth-like hands from bough to bough, his bare feet sinking amongst soft leaves. The world is green and sinuous brown. The low forest holds him in its heart. "She brought me here. It was not me," he mutters. "I did as you asked me. I did everything you asked me." His arm throbs. It has been 20 long years since last he trod this way. 20 years of waiting to return. He concentrates on his hands, one in front of the other, one to grasp before releasing the one behind, pulling himself deeper into the trees, deeper into fever. He slides through them like a great chameleon. "This could be it," he mutters, steeling himself to face his ever-companion. He hears singing. The voice is dancing among the leaves. He can see the place through the trees now. There is the meadow. The singing is warbling from there. He moves through like a bear, a great ghost without sound, and now he sees the source of the song. The creature is there, the girl. "Like a bee to honey," he mutters, sure that he is the bee. The creature is in the clearing, held by the soft grass of the meadow. There is a stone planted in the earth at her head. She is on her knees, a stick clutched in both hands, and she is digging. He stops to look at her. Her voice fills the air and at the same time turns in his chest. It burns. He does not want to break her peace. But of course he must. This is his trajectory. "What are you digging for?" She does not turn to look at him. Instead, she continues. "I don't know. There is something buried here." "I don't want you to dig in there. This place is precious to me." "This is not your place. It is mine." He comes to stand beside her. "Will you help me?" She turns to him and he is struck by her eyes. It occurs to him that if he were to depart now, he would be happy. He holds his arm out to her. It is a tuber swelling from his elbow, fat and purple. She turns her eyes to the cut. The lips of it are black. She touches it with her fingertips. His body shivers. "What is buried here?" "My wife is buried in this ground." She places her thumbs on either side of the wound, and still she looks into his eyes. "She has been long dead." "Yes." "But she did not die here." "No. She died in the bay, away from here, and you brought her back. You dragged her over the mountain." "Yes. I brought her home." She continues to look into him, deeper. He can feel her moving inside him. He begins to shiver. "But she is not the only one buried here." "No. There is a tiny box. Who does it belong to?" "It was our daughter's." "That is the one I want. She is the secret you are hiding from me." She presses the flesh and the wound distends. He writhes against her fingers, but he does not move away. In his gasping, she sees a dark-haired little girl, his whole heart, walking in the world. "I will tell you all of it." She shifts her thumbs down to catch the underside of the bulb, the wound's black lips swelling up and parting as she presses. He looks into her green eyes, the fever causing them to blaze. She bears down on the wound, taking delight in digging her fingers beneath the awful fruit, until finally its black throat appears, a tiny yellow dot distending at its mouth. Sweat is pouring from him. "You are hiding something, but I will discover the truth. I will pull it out of you." She pushes, and then it tears and pus gluts from the opening. The man gasps and faints. She looks on him for a moment, this fallen bear in the woods. Then she inspects the wound, palpating it with her fingers, releasing milky blood. There is an open chamber beneath the fluid. She inserts her finger into it, probing as the big man twitches beneath her. She spits into the wound, cleaning it, and spreads the lips of it apart. She blows gently on the flesh, soothing it, probing it, and then she spies its secret. A grain of black. Gently she coaxes, stroking at the seed with her fingertip until finally it emerges at the lip. A piece of flesh. She raises it to her eye. It is from the cephalopod. "Great Mother," she sounds to the shred of meat. She places it into her wet mouth and swallows. She sits for a time, cross-legged beside the giant body, looking out on this clearing in the wood.